I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Hey everyone, so exciting to have you join me again. This podcast episode is focused around structure and routine for ADHD kids, but really it's for all kids. ADHD, autism, anxiety, those kids need extra structure and routine, but all kids need structure and routine in order to, um, feel safe and secure in their homes, and to be able to really focus on those higher level things we want them to do, like learn, regulate their emotions, develop new skills. I was talking just this morning to families in um, my Chaos to Calm program about that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which lots of people might be familiar with, but if you're not, I guess the basic premise is that we need to know that our basic needs are met first before we can start looking at other needs. So, for example, we need to know we've got shelter, that we're safe, that we have food, that we're kind of okay physically before we can then think about problem solving, regulating emotions, learning new skills, and developing self awareness. Um, and structure and routine for me sit as a really important part of those bottom layers for children because they're not in charge of their day to day. They don't know what's happening. They're reliant on their family and school system around them. So the more structure and routine we can provide, it communicates a sense of safety to the children that we're working with or that we're parenting so that they can rest assured we've got that stuff covered so they can focus on the higher level um, the higher level skills. I have coming up a really great podcast episode, which is an interview with Jeremiah Hartman, who is a great ADHD advocate and an ADHDer himself, although he talks about without the disorder, ADHA, ADH, so attention deficit hyperactivity. I agree that the disorder part's a little bit difficult. It's not a nice term. But in talking with him, I think what became clear to me is the need for that structure and routine that's still present even for ADHD adults. And the idea that if we can provide that stuff early on, then kids will really benefit from that. So, the 3 things I wanted to cover, I guess, were the idea of creating a balanced schedule, how to incorporate some flexibility into that, and then how to use visual aids and tools as well. All of this stuff is in the programs I have to support parents of an ADHDer. So there's supporting your ADHD primary schooler and supporting your ADHD teenager. It's a really key integral part, I think, of having a calm family home. So for all kids, um, but especially for the ADHD brains. So creating a balanced schedule, I think how I talk about that is it's important to have balance. And so, as part of that, and Jeremiah and I were talking about, it's a balance between structured activities and downtime. It's also a balance between predictability and flexibility as well. Nobody wants to be overly scheduled or overly routined. Um, think about that from the point of view of having a job where somebody's micromanaging you. That is not enjoyable. But on the flip side, having a job where you've given no guidance at all is really disconcerting. So trying to get the balance right is important. When I talk to families about creating a schedule that has this balance, I think it's about trying to keep in mind the basics or the bones of a day, or the structure, I guess the core structure of a day. So it might be, for example, getting up at the same time, which is a really strongly recommended sleep hygiene thing. I hate it myself, but I really try to do it. So getting up at a certain time, leaving for school at a certain time, something in the afternoon that's kind of predictable, dinner around the same time, and bedtime at the same time. That's an example of the structured activities. Within that, you can have some extra structure for things like, you know, the activities that you might have on for the weekends or after school, or chores and that kind of stuff. But it also gives you the opportunity to have some downtime as well. So kids might get to chill in the afternoon, which means doing whatever they want or choosing between a couple of activities. I think the benefit of this is that the more predictability you can have, the less anxiety your kids will experience. And we know ADHDers and autistic kids experience more anxiety than other kids do. The second point I wanted to make is about the flexibility. So you probably think, I mean, you may be listening and thinking, well, that's great, but we can't do that all the time. Or what about the days when it goes like this, or the days when it goes like that? And I agree with you. It can't be the same all the time. I think it's important to balance that structure with some flexibility. I would say too that the flexibility needs to be about things like the routine. So when you've got different after school stuff on, or the concert, or the end of kindy this, or the end of school that, that's when the flexibility can come in. But I think it's also important to think about the flexibility in terms of how your child's ability levels will change as well. So on a day when they're incredibly stressed, you might need to reduce some of the expectations for them. That's probably the best thing to say about that. How you can convey that to your kids, I think, really depends on their skill level and their age, probably. So for older kids, telling them that actually tomorrow's going to be a bit different because of this and this is great for teenagers or for kids who are more capable. There's some kids who might need a couple of days' notice. There's some kids who'll need a lot of notice. And I think you really need to use discretion as to what level of support for the change your child needs. The third part I wanted to talk about was using visual information and tools. And I honestly think anybody who's stuck around long enough might soon become sick of hearing me talk about this, but it's just so important for that structure and routine. I say a lot to families that routine is like communication, and so the visual routines are just a permanent product of that communication. You can use things like visual routines at home, so posters about the schedule. You can use a diary. You can use things like timers or organizational apps or list apps if your kids need minute detail support with that stuff. But in terms of talking about routines, I think it's usually visual supports, but then some kind of visual timer as well, because often kids, the visual support or the diary visual schedule will be there, but parents say, yeah, but they just don't realize how much time has passed, or they get distracted and they run out of time. That's not uncommon. It's difficult for ADHDs to manage time, but so if you use the visual support um, as well as a visual timer that helps them track how much time they've used and how much time is left to go, I think that's really useful. The other thing I love about the visual supports is when we talk about building in some flexibility, you can use things like a question mark to convey to your kids that something's going to be different within the schedule. And so that it communicates that there's a little bit of flexibility required, and that helps kids get used to the times when the routine doesn't go to plan, because that can be equally as challenging for parents as well. If that's something that's a challenge for you, I would say to stick around for the topics about on the podcast about flexible thinking, and also about managing time in ADHD as well. But those things are all covered in the time, and managing time is covered in both ADHD programs, because that's a really big part of where things can go wrong in parenting, or trying to support ADHD kids if you don't understand that they experience time differently to you. Flexible thinking is going to be a podcast topic, and in the autism programs coming in 2025 as well, because if if you think your child's got some trouble with flexible thinking, chances are all of the new things that you're trying to teach them are going to be difficult, because anything new to learn requires flexible thinking. So hang around for that bit. Well, not hang around, but come, that'll be covered in the next um in an upcoming podcast episode as well. I think as you will listen to the interview with Jeremiah, I think what you will learn is just hearing it from an adult perspective, I think gives a voice to the kids we have in our lives that are too young to tell us all of these things. And so I really loved the opportunity to be able to talk with him about that and think about potentially then what would be different if kids had more of that structure and routine in order to help them develop a good sense of who they are and what they can do. I really can't wait for you to hear that one. And in the meantime, I will be back next time to talk about the emotional side of things as well. In talking with Jeremiah, I think there was lots of his learning came through his experience of ADHD as a child, has now then informed his approach to parenting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those skills in short detail next episode, because then you'll be able to hear the full interview with Jeremiah and just sit back and enjoy it. Because I've kind of picked all the skills out and talking about them at other times as well. So thanks for joining me again, and again putting up with the Renault noise, and hopefully it wasn't too disruptive. Yeah, I will talk with you again really soon. Thanks for listening again. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.